The 2024 Rogue has had its reveal, and though we didn't get a ton of new information, what we did see does suggest that the class is going to be better and more consistent than ever before, but it does feel like it might have been a bit left behind when compared to some of its martial counterparts. Let's get into it. I'll first state that this video is not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, and I do not have an advanced copy of the Player's Handbook. Everything we're discussing here will be based on impressions from the reveal video, combined with what we learned in the playtest, and how the experience has changed from the 2014 version of the class. I'm also currently on a quest to hit 10,000 subscribers by the time that the new PHB comes out in September, and I've been pouring as much work as I possibly can to stay up to date with everything. So if you want to support me, I would really appreciate a sub to the channel. Thanks. First up is Thieves' Cant, which receives a small but meaningful improvement. Now, in addition to learning Thieves' Cant, which isn't really a language per se, but rather it's more of an understanding of code or signals, you also get to select a language proficiency. I think this is a solid improvement and one that we saw in the playtest, so I'm happy to see that it made its way through to the new Player's Handbook. Often, Thieves' Cant could go completely unused as a feature in many campaigns, since unless there's a particular arc that involves some unsavory guilds, or if you happen to encounter some, you might never use the feature, or you might be using it all the time. That's the thing. It was such a high variance feature, which isn't really what you want for first level. You want your early features to be defining and foundational, and now this small improvement to Thieves' Cant helps in that since you can select the language that is likely to benefit you in the campaign, and also use it to help fill out your backstory for how you pick that language up. From there, and also at first level, rogues now also get weapon mastery, which we've seen in essentially every typically weapon-wielding class so far. With it, rogues can use the mastery property on two types of weapons that they are proficient in. This is cool to see and opens up the rogue to more options in combat, which will be something of a trend here. For example, the Vex property, which can be found on shortbows, and a few other weapons too, will allow the character, if they hit and deal damage to a creature, to gain advantage on their next attack against that creature before the end of their next turn. This is cool since it allows a rogue to essentially set up their own sneak attack without assistance from anyone else. And since there is no resource cost to using masteries, provided that you use this on every attack that you make, you can always have a chance to set up your next attack with sneak attack. And since you're making each subsequent roll with advantage, it makes it perpetually more likely to proc Vex. This feature feeds itself and is sure to be very powerful. Next up is Sneak Attack, which on its own didn't receive any big changes. However, all that changes once you hit 5th level and unlock Cunning Strike, one of the best new features we saw introduced in the playtest. What Cunning Strike does is allow you, when you deal sneak attack damage to a target, to sacrifice some of that damage to do something else to the target. For example, you can forego 1d6 sneak attack damage to attempt to trip an enemy. If you do, the target makes a dexterity saving throw, and on a failed save, they fall prone if they are large or smaller. That can be an extremely powerful effect, and it doesn't even force you to sacrifice all of your sneak attack damage. You even also get the option to poison or withdraw, which allows you to move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks after the attack. There's a lot going on with Cunning Strike, so I do want to talk a bit about it. Firstly, I and most other people love this feature. It gives rogues something else to do during combat. For all the flavor and the aesthetic that the class has going for it, during combat, it always felt a little bit flat, at least to me. They never had a lot of options for things to do during a fight, and if for some reason they weren't able to activate their sneak attack, then the situation got even worse. And I get why, it's no secret. The intent behind the class was to be a great single target damage dealer that emphasizes you getting the jump on your quarry, and for all the lack of prowess in a direct fight, they made up for it outside of combat with things like multiple expertise unlocks, more ability score improvements than any other class except the fighter, and reliable talent. This, however, gives the class such a great opportunity to still flex that theme by doing roguey things on their turn and getting to make interesting choices at the same time. I think Cunning Strike is also particularly important as it helps to bridge the gap between a distinct subclass feature drought that the rogue has always suffered from. From when it first obtains its subclass at 3rd level to the time it gets its next subclass feature, they're 6 levels apart, so that happens at 9th level, when most campaigns are just beginning to wind down. Cunning Strike helps give the class something else to do and consider, and provides options while they continue to wait on their other subclass features. Cunning Strike is a great ability to allow you and your party to potentially do more damage later or impair a creature, but it's not dealing any damage on its own. In fact, it's causing you to lose damage. But if you're able to make up for that by having your party attacking a prone creature, this can be very strong. Overall, the feature adds incredible versatility and options to a class that often lacked them in combat. This continues at 11th level with improved Cunning Strike, which now allows you to activate 2 of your Cunning Strike options on the same attack. Being able to trip and poison a target on a single blow feels like a lot of fun. At 14th level, Cunning Strike improves again with the new Devious Strikes, which are a more expensive and additional options for your Cunning Strike feature. 3 new options come online here: Daze, Knockout, and Obscure. The Daze option forces a creature on a failed Constitution saving throw to have to choose between moving, taking an action, or taking a bonus action on their next turn. This feels like some degree of confirmation that the newly added Dazed condition from the playtest is here to stay, which I am very happy to see. But with that now at 11th level, you might be wondering what happened to Reliable Talent. And the answer is that it simply comes online much earlier, being unlocked at 7th level now, which is huge. Reliable Talent has always been one of my favorite rogue features, so I think it's amazing that players will get to play with it sooner. The 14th level feature of Blind Sense has been completely cut from the class in favor of adding Devious Strikes and a buff to Slippery Mind, which now also provides proficiency in Charisma saving throws in addition to Wisdom saving throws. While it does kinda hurt to lose Blind Sense, its range was fairly limited, which is common for the trait, but I would still much rather have Devious Strikes over that. Also, Steady Aim has been moved from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything into the new Player's Handbook, essentially unchanged, and interacts nicely with the new Assassin Rogue feature and a Thief one as well. Finally, the 20th level capstone Stroke of Luck has been improved. Now you can also use it on saving throws, which, finally. This just feels right, and if you use it on a missed attack roll, it's considered to be a critical hit. While that might have felt busted at a low level, this feels completely fine to have a once per short rest on-demand crit. Moving on to the subclasses, we begin with the Assassin. Firstly, you now get both a Disguise Kit and a Poisoner's Kit in addition to proficiency with them, which is just a nice quality of life improvement. Then at 3rd level, the Assassinate feature has been completely redesigned, in part to accommodate the new surprise rules, but also to make it more reliable and consistent. In case you missed it, the rules for surprise have been completely changed and are significantly easier to implement. Now, instead of missing the entire first round of combat, a surprised creature simply has disadvantage on their initiative check. This combos very well with the new Assassinate feature, which now gives the rogue advantage on their initiative check, and also on the first round of combat, gives them advantage on attack rolls against creatures that haven't taken their turn yet. So now, because you have advantage on your initiative checks, and enemies will likely be making a straight roll or at disadvantage if they're surprised, you are far more likely to activate this effect, which also lets you activate your sneak attack without doing anything else. But finally, if you deal sneak attack damage to any creature during the first round of combat, regardless of whether they've taken their turn or not, they take extra damage equal to your rogue level. Overall, I love the changes to the Assassinate feature. It feels so much more seamless to use, and more importantly, you actually get to use it. Yes, losing auto crits can hurt, I get it. But given how unreliable it was to consistently surprise enemies, it always just felt like a feature that had the potential to be awesome, but almost never was. I'll take the new version any day. Though that said, I feel like the bonus damage should have been at least 2 times your rogue level, but I guess that's neither here nor there. At 9th level comes Infiltration Expertise, which brings the effect of the old Imposter feature down from 13th level, and the time studying has been reduced to 1 hour from 3. This is again just a small quality of life improvement. Additionally, now it also grants an additional effect called Roving Aim, which allows you, when you use your steady aim, to not set your speed to 0 afterward. My understanding of the way that this works is that you still can't move before you make your attack with steady aim, but now after you attack, you can continue to move. This feels good, but I can't help but feel like they could have just gone one step further and removed the requirement of standing still altogether. This would give the assassin essentially an always-on advantage, which I feel like I'm okay with, despite how strong it can potentially be. You've monoclassed 9 levels into Rogue, I feel like you've earned it. Next at 13th level comes Envenom Weapons, which is essentially just a buff to the poison option from Cunning Strike. This lets you, when you use the poison option, to deal an extra 2d6 poison damage, assuming the creature failed their save. You're essentially sacrificing 1d6 to gain 2d6 poison damage, so you're really only adding 1d6, but at least it lets you bypass poison resistance, which is pretty reasonable. It's worth noting that it does not bypass immunity to poison, and there are a lot of creatures with immunity to poison. Finally, at 17th level comes Death Strike, which allows you, when you use your sneak attack on the first round of combat, to double the damage dealt from the attack provided the target fails a Constitution saving throw. Sneak attack damage is considered part of the attack, which means that since you got 10d6 sneak attack dice, plus whatever else you're going to be adding to the attack, this can do a significant amount of damage, potentially one-shotting or at least massively damaging the target. Again, this is just so much better than what was in 2014, since it's no longer reliant on the target being surprised. Next up is the Arcane Trickster, which has had some nice updates, including that there are no more School of Magic restrictions on the class, and now you can use an Arcane Focus for spellcasting, which are both a very big deal and lend themselves to the class feeling more cohesive and easier to use. It also opens up a plethora of options that weren't possible previously. They've also revealed that the 13th level feature, Versatile Trickster, has been improved to combine with Cunning Strike. What it does now is allow you, when you use the trip option from Cunning Strike, to have your mage hand also be able to trip another creature. This feels like a very solid improvement to the feature overall. Unfortunately, that's essentially everything that we learned about the Arcane Trickster though. Next up is the Soul Knife, another psionic themed subclass to appear in the new player's handbook alongside the Psi Warrior, but we also didn't get a lot of details here either. When it comes to the Soul Knife, one of the biggest issues with the subclass has always been the fact that using your Psychic Blades feature required you to take the attack action, which meant that you couldn't ever use it on an opportunity attack, which just kind of felt odd. Well, now that appears to have been addressed, with Jeremy Crawford confirming that the Soul Knife Rogue will be able to use their Psychic Blades on an opportunity attack. Additionally, Psychic Blades have also been given a mastery property, Vex, which also means that if you're playing a Soul Knife, you don't have to completely abandon one of the rogue's new core class features, that being Weapon Mastery. This is a nice touch that helps all the elements of the class feel more cohesive. Again though, having the Vex property means that you will fairly consistently be able to activate Sneak Attack on your own. Finally, for the subclasses is the Thief. The first update is that the Thief will be able to use their 3rd level feature, Fast Hands, to activate a magic item as a bonus action now. Many may not even be aware that as it currently stands in 5th edition, Fast Hands can't be used to activate a magic item, at least as written. The reason why they might not know this is because this clarification is buried deep within Chapter 7 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, where it says if an item requires an action to activate, that action isn't a function of the use an object action. So a feature such as the Rogue's Fast Hands can't be used to activate that item. It's ridiculous how obscure such a simple rule was, but at least now they're finally updating it. Next, for second story work, there were a few small updates. Now when determining your jump distance, you can use your dexterity score rather than your strength score. However, before the feature just allowed you to add your dexterity modifier to the distance, so I'm not sure how much of a difference it's going to make, but it will probably help. Secondly, the feature now officially gives you a climb speed. It always essentially did, but at least now it's written out clearly. The 9th level feature, Supreme Sneak, is getting a very nice buff. Now it will be added as an additional Cunning Strike option, which will allow you to make an attack while hidden and stay hidden. This feels very thematically on brand for the class, and I love it. Also, provided the rogue can hide, using Supreme Sneak will essentially give the thief an at-will advantage, and as a result will always have their bonus action available to use for something else, and potentially never have to use steady aim at all, which is an interesting side effect. As an aside, I really do appreciate that the team is experimenting with adding additional options to Cunning Strike through subclasses. I think this will have a very beneficial impact on the class over time, and allow them to create more diverse builds and subclasses as the game continues to grow with new books in the future. The biggest downside here is just the immense gap between obtaining your subclass and getting your next subclass feature at 9th level. Finally, Use Magic Device has been changed significantly. It now allows you to attune to 4 items rather than 3, and when you use a magic item that requires charges, you have a chance to not expend any charges from it. Additionally, the feature provides instructions for how to use spell scrolls that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to use. Overall, I am satisfied with the tweaks to the rogue. Jeremy Crawford said at the beginning of the video that their primary goal was ultimately to not break the class. Now, while I don't love that kind of trepidation to begin your design framework from, I will agree that they have not broken the rogue, and that it is essentially better in nearly all respects than the version from 2014. I do feel like it didn't get quite as much new and flashy stuff, especially as compared to the fighter and the barbarian that we saw last week, but that's likely just because it didn't need it. My only concern will be if the other classes leapfrogged it a bit too much, but I suppose time will tell. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to help me reach that 10,000 sub goal by the time the 2024 Player's Handbook comes out in September. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.